Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Genachowski, it's good to see you. And I know that you're going to be, the FCC is holding a workshop on its notice of proposed rulemaking on net neutrality in Seattle coming up here later this month. So I know you're going to hear a lot about what we think about in the Northwest as how fundamental it is to the future of broadband in the United States to make sure there is an open internet. So we appreciate you holding that field hearing, and I always am amazed when I see these, these reports, since the decision, the public, 53% of the public doesn't want the FCC to regulate the internet. When the issue is the public wants the FCC to protect them, to make sure that the internet isn't artificially taxed by business, preventing consumers access to content without paying more for it. And the notion that somebody thinks they can spin this around Washington, I guarantee you will hear an earful when you get to Seattle, who they understand that access to content through the internet shouldn't be artificially taxed. One of the things I'm curious about is, since we had our hearing here about the Comcast-NBC merger, we've now had this DC decision. And so the potential combination of Comcast and NBC, how will that impact your, I know you can't speak specifically, I'm asking you to speak broadly about the commission in evaluating that deal. In the MCI Verizon, you were able to condition post-merger certain conditions be met, protecting the consumer using that net neutrality. So how will you look at making sure that content isn't blocked, that content isn't blocked unless it's, things that will be very important for that decision?
Well, as you indicate, I can't talk specifically about the transaction, but I take your views, and I'll make sure that they're incorporated in the Commission's consideration of the transaction.
Do you have a concern generally that's harder now since the court decision?
I'm not sure that it's harder. I think that there are many issues, very serious issues in the transaction that we'll be taking one by one very seriously and looking at them on their own terms. And I imagine, I'm sure that these issues will be considered very seriously as part of that. We've already heard from people on that issue in the transaction. I'm sure we'll hear from more. It'll be taken very seriously as part of the review of that transaction.
I know also in another decision with the Third Circuit's removing the stay on media ownership that came out under Chairman Martin, that there's now an opportunity for the Commission to start moving on that process. And so I know you have a quadrennial review of media ownership. So to me, it's very important that the Commission start moving on this and make sure that you consider this in a comprehensive way. Is that part of the plan?
Yes, we started the process of the review, the 2010 review in 2009. There'll be a Commission action in the near future to go to the next stage, and we'll be tackling the ownership issues.
Thank you. And on the issue of the broadband plan, we're 8+ years after 9/11, and yet the notion of interoperability communication system for first responders is still more of a goal than a reality. In your broadband plan, you have some objectives to meet certain petitions no later than the third quarter of this year. We're very interested in the Northwest, Seattle, particularly in Pierce County, and in Seattle. You might have seen this rash of police killings and news. So the law enforcement community is very interested in basically getting these public safety spectrum trusts to be able to access for building a interoperable public network.
It's a vitally important issue, and the plan has it's a real action plan to move forward quickly and make sure we get a public safety network built. It does require, we suggest, some actions by Congress, because this is an area where we don't think the private sector will get a public safety network built. But we have a series of steps to take in connection with that to make sure that networks are hardened, interoperable, and we have a unique opportunity now that I'm very hopeful that we can take advantage of. as we're building out our 4G networks, if we can build out the public safety network at the same time, we'll reduce the costs of that dramatically. If we don't move forward with the public safety network now, and all the 4G network truck rolls and equipment are already out, and then we try to accomplish exactly the same thing later, the costs will be much, much higher. And so I agree with you that it's essential to move forward and to move forward on a very fast timetable, and I look forward to working together on that.
But you're playing calls by the third quarter of this year, so you think you'll make that?
We will make our part. We don't have the funding available for the funding part, but we will make we will do everything that we need to do on our schedule.
Thank you, and I'd just like to echo my colleagues' calls about unlicensed spectrum as it relates to the development moving forward of Wi-Fi, and I know that you guys are looking at 20 megahertz, but there's a lot bigger need for this, and so I'll look forward to asking you more about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.